The wind howled across the snowy wilderness like a living thing. It was late evening, and the storm had grown wild enough to hide the mountains themselves. Small flakes of snow drifted down, thick and endless, covering every piece of land in white. In a tiny wooden cabin, a man named Daniel sat by the fire. The flames' light danced across the walls made of rough logs. He had lived in this lonely place for almost 2 years, ever since he had left the city to find peace and silence away from everyone. Daniel was a quiet man who liked to fix things. He had built his own cabin with his own hands. The sound of wind was strange, but he had learned to live with it. Sometimes it felt like the wind was the only voice left in the world. That night, he was mending a small metal stove when the storm outside grew louder, shaking the shutters as if someone were knocking. He sighed and went back to his work. But then, he heard something different, a faint sound. It came again, 3 sharp knocks, then silence. For a moment, Daniel thought he was imagining it. No one ever came here. It was too far, too cold, and too dangerous. But then he heard another knock, this time followed by a weak cry. He stood quickly and opened the door. A wall of wind and snow rushed in, nearly throwing the lantern out. Through the white blur, he saw a figure. Someone was out there. He reached forward and pulled the figure inside before the storm swallowed her completely. A young woman stumbled into the cabin, wrapped in a torn coat covered with ice. Her hands were shaking, her face pale with cold. She could barely speak. Daniel shut the door and pushed the bolt in place. The storm hit the cabin again with full force, making the walls creak. He guided her to a chair near the fire. "Sit. You're safe now," he said. His voice was calm, gentle. She didn't answer. Her teeth were chattering hard. He brought a blanket from the bed and wrapped it around her shoulders. He grabbed a tin cup, filled it with hot water, and added a drop of honey. When he handed it to her, her hands trembled so badly that he had to help her hold it. After a few minutes of quiet, some color returned to her face. Her eyes were blue, almost too bright, like ice on a sunny day. She looked at him carefully, still breathing fast. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Shouldn't have been out there. This storm can kill a moose in half an hour." "What were you doing?" She looked down at the blanket instead of answering. The firelight flickered across her face, showing both exhaustion and fear. She looked like she had run from something far worse than a storm. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. Her voice was soft and tired. "I just needed shelter. Well, you found it. You can rest here till the storm ends. I've got food, water, and enough wood to keep the fire going all night." She seemed to relax a little, nodding weakly. He turned away, giving her space, and added another log to the fire. The flames jumped and crackled. Behind him, he could sense her watching quietly, as if studying every small move he made. After a while, he said without turning, "My name's Daniel." Silence. Then she said, "I'm Evelyn." The name came out gently, like a secret she wasn't sure she should share. He smiled to himself. "Well, Evelyn, this isn't the warmest place in the world, but it's better than the storm." He walked to the stove and set up a small pot of soup. The rich smell of broth slowly filled the cabin. Evelyn drew her blanket tighter and looked around. The place was plain, but neat books on a shelf, tools lined up on the wall, a small handcrafted radio on the table. Everything looked simple, almost peaceful. She looked at Daniel again, but her expression changed in a second. Surprise flashed first, then confusion, then something like fear. Her face turned pale again. She set the cup down and stood, still shaking but now keeping her distance. Daniel noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked. "What's wrong?" Her eyes were wide. "You," she said, her voice trembling. "You were in the Fire City." He frowned, confused. "What? You're one of them?" she whispered, stepping back until she reached the wall. Daniel blinked, unsure what she meant. "I think there's a mistake. I haven't seen anyone for months. Please calm down." But she shook her head and pressed herself against the logs. Her breath came fast. The storm screamed outside, rattling the windows. They were both silent for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of fire and the cry of wind through the chimney. Daniel took a slow breath and said softly, "You're safe, Evelyn. Whatever you think you saw before, it's over now. I'm not your enemy." She didn't answer. Her hands clutched the blanket like a shield. Inside the small cabin, the air was warm but heavy. Outside, the storm went on, endless and white. Inside, neither of them knew that this night their meeting would change not only their lives, but perhaps the course of the world waiting beyond the snow. Morning came slowly over the frozen land. The storm had not stopped, but the wind had grown weaker. The snow still fell, though it no longer screamed against the windows. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, and Daniel sat watchful beside it. Evelyn was still asleep under the blanket, her breathing calm now instead of ragged like the night before. The color had returned to her cheeks. She looked peaceful for the first time since she had arrived. Daniel poured some water into a small kettle and placed it on the stove. He moved quietly, careful not to wake her. His thoughts raced. What had she meant by calling him one of them? He could not understand it, but something about her fear felt too real to ignore. She had looked at him like she remembered his face from another world, from some story full of loss and fire. When she finally woke, the smell of hot tea filled the cabin. She blinked at the light that seeped through the frosted glass, then sat up slowly. Her hands were still trembling, though less than the night before. Daniel turned toward her and gave a small nod. "Good morning," he said icily. "You slept for almost 10 hours?" She looked uncertain, as if she did not know how to answer that. "I didn't mean to," she said quietly, tightening the blanket around herself. "That's fine," Daniel said. "You needed rest. There's tea on the stove and there's some bread too." She hesitated before she went to the table. She took the cup from him carefully, her eyes flicking to his face once or twice, still wary. They drank in silence for a few minutes while snowflakes drifted against the window, soft and slow now. Finally, Daniel said, "You said something strange last night. You said I was from somewhere called the Fire City. What did you mean by that?" Evelyn's hand stopped halfway to her mouth. For a second, she looked like she might not answer at all. But she set the cup down and looked at him. "I was part of the royal court in the south," she said, "before they took it over. Called it the Sovereign Confederation. They said they wanted peace and order, but they brought control, not peace." Daniel nodded slightly. He had heard stories about it, the long wars and the new rulers who claimed to rebuild the world. Evelyn went on in a low voice. "They built great cities with towers of metal and fire. The walls shone red at night from the heat of their machines. People called the capital the Fire City because you could see its light even from the mountains." She looked at him with searching eyes. "You were one of the builders, weren't you? I remember your face from meetings I was never meant to attend. You were an engineer for them." He did not speak at first. Her words were sharp and true. He leaned back where he sat and looked at the flames in the stove. "I was," he said finally. I worked for them years ago. I built machines to make power, to build faster, to heal the land after the wars, but they used my work to build weapons instead. When I saw what they did, I left. I came here to forget." Evelyn stared quietly. The sound of the wind filled the silence between them. "They used your machines to burn my city," she said softly. "That's why I was afraid." Daniel's hands tightened around the cup. The weight of memory pressed heavily on him. "I know," he said. "I've carried that guilt every day since. I thought leaving would erase it." For a long time neither spoke. Outside, the light grew brighter through the storm. Finally, Evelyn stood and walked to the small window. She looked out over the endless white. "You said you came here to forget," she said without turning. "The world doesn't need people who forget. It needs people who remember and change." Her words cut through the quiet like a spark. Daniel turned toward her. "And what about you?" he asked. "You ran from them too." Evelyn looked back at him. "I didn't run to forget," she said. "I ran to survive. But I will go back. I have to fight for the people they left behind. They think I'm gone forever, but I still remember every name, every promise." Daniel studied her, surprised by the steel in her calm voice. This woman who had arrived half-frozen now spoke like a leader again, even without her crown or her court. "You can't go back now," he said. "It's too dangerous. They'll still be looking for you." "I know," she said simply. "But one day, when the right time comes, I will return." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The storm was fading, but the air between them was filled with something stronger than fear. He admired her courage, even when he wanted to warn her against it. Evelyn sat again near the fire. "They will come this way sooner or later," she said. This is too close to their border. Daniel nodded slowly. Then we stay ready, he said. If they come, we survive. Outside, the snow fell gently now, the sky turning faintly blue. Inside, two people who had once stood on opposite sides of history shared quiet warmth for the first time. They did not know what waited beyond the storm, or how thin the peace truly was. But for that moment, in the soft glow of the cabin, they were no longer enemies. They were two souls who had both escaped the same fire, and now they waited for what would come next. The next morning came quiet and still. The sky over the mountains was pale and bright, and the storm had passed at last. The snow outside was deep, shining under the early sun. Daniel stepped out of the cabin to check the sky. Cold bit at his face, but the air was clear now. Smoke rose from the small chimney behind him. It was the first calm day in a long while. Inside the cabin, Evelyn was awake. She had folded her blanket neatly and placed it on the bed. Her eyes followed Daniel through the window while he worked outside. He moved with calm purpose, checking the tools and the small machine beside the cabin. She could see now that the cabin was not just a simple place for living. It was part workshop, part shelter, filled with quiet secrets. When Daniel came back in, his beard covered in frost, she gave him a look full of questions. "What is that machine you keep outside?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "It's an old generator. It keeps the lights and heat running when the wood runs low. I built it myself." "It looks like something from the cities," she said. "It is," he admitted. "Or at least it started that way. I took the parts with me when I left. It's different now. Doesn't hurt anyone." Evelyn nodded slightly. "You still build," she said. "Even after everything." Daniel looked down at his hands. "It's all I know how to do," he said. "And maybe someday I can use what I build to fix what I help damage." Evelyn sat silent for a while, watching the fire burn low in the stove. Then she spoke, her tone softer. "When I was at court, I thought power meant control. I thought if I ruled with laws and order, people would follow peace. But power does not always listen to kindness. The new rulers took everything and twisted it. They said progress needed sacrifice. I believed them at first." Daniel listened. Her voice carried both sadness and strength. "You can still make a different kind of power," he said. "One that builds instead of burns." She smiled faintly, a fragile smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "You sound like someone who believes there's still hope for us." "I do," Daniel said simply. "If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't still be alive." Outside, the sound of a bird echoed weakly, a rare thing in winter. Both of them turned toward the window. The world beyond was white and silent, but that small sound was a reminder that life still existed, even in the coldest places. Over the next few days, the snow softened, and patches of dark rock began to show through. Evelyn helped Daniel gather firewood and repair a broken part of the cabin roof. She learned to split wood with the heavy axe, her breath coming out in small clouds. Daniel taught her how to use his small radio, a device that could pick up faint signals from far away. She listened to it one night and heard only static. Then a voice came through, broken and distant, speaking of new laws, new soldiers, new searches. Evelyn's face tensed. "They're looking everywhere," she said quietly. "They must know I'm alive." Daniel turned down the volume. "And we should be careful," he said. "This cabin is hidden well, but nothing stays hidden forever." That night, neither of them slept deeply. Daniel stayed awake, thinking of how close danger might be. Evelyn dreamed of her old city, of endless towers and burning skies, of people running through the streets as the machines rose from the ground. When she woke, her cheeks were wet with tears. Daniel was by the fire again, working on a metal device. He looked up when she stirred. "You were talking in your sleep," he said gently. She rubbed her eyes. "I saw it all again. The day everything changed. The smoke, the heat, the fear. I can still hear the sound of the towers breaking." Daniel set the tool down and looked at her carefully. "You survived that," he said. "That means something." "I lost almost everything," she said softly. "My family, my people, my name. Do you know what it's like to watch the world built by your ancestors crumble in front of you?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Not the same way. But I helped make some of those machines. I know what it's like to live with the regret of creation." Their eyes met, and for a moment, The silence between them felt like an understanding neither of them could put into words. Later that day, Daniel showed Evelyn a small trap he had set near the edge of the forest. They walked through the snow together. The trees around them were tall and quiet. When they reached the trap, Daniel stopped. A small rabbit had been caught. Evelyn knelt beside it and freed it instead of keeping it. He smiled a little at her kindness. "You're braver than most of the people who had armies behind them," he said. She looked up. "Kindness isn't bravery," she said. "But I think it might be the only way we survive what we've done." On their way back, a distant sound rolled over the wind. It was low, dull, and far away, nothing natural. Evelyn froze. Daniel did too. Came again, clearer this time, like the rumble of engines. Daniel's expression turned serious. "They're coming," he said quietly. I hoped it would take longer. Evelyn gripped her cloak tighter, looking toward the sky, though she could see nothing through the trees. The peace they had shared for those few short days was breaking like thin ice. Back at the cabin, Daniel began to move quickly, gathering supplies and checking the generator. His hands moved fast, controlled by habit and reason. Evelyn watched him, fear mixing with resolve. The world outside was silent again, but the quiet now was full of warning. Both of them knew that whatever waited beyond the hills would end their hiding soon. In the small cabin, two lives once lost were about to face the storm of human power once more. The next evening, the mountain air had turned sharp again, quiet and strange. Daniel and Evelyn kept the lights low. The cabin seemed smaller than before, every sound from outside making the walls feel thinner. Daniel checked the old radio again, tuning slowly through static. Somewhere right near the edge of hearing, a metallic voice spoke through the crackle. It mentioned a search party moving through the northern range. The words were simple, but they carried fear. They were close. Evelyn stood behind him, her face pale in the glow of the shortwave light. "They found our direction," she whispered. "They won't stop." Daniel nodded once, calm but firm. "Then we won't wait for them to find us. We'll leave before morning." He went to the storage corner and pulled open a trapdoor beneath the table. Beneath it lay the secret he had never shown anyone. A narrow ladder led down to a hidden space beneath the cabin. Evelyn followed carefully. The small room below looked like an underground workshop. Shelves of metal parts, heavy cables, and worn boxes filled the space. In the center rested something that looked like a boat made of steel and glass, but smaller, shaped like a bird's body. It had wings folded tight against its sides. Evelyn looked at it with disbelief. "You built this here?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. Years ago, when I left the city, I brought what I knew with me. I started building something to carry me far away if I ever needed to leave. It can fly, but only over short distances, enough to reach the next valley." She stepped closer, touching the smooth metal. "It could save us." "Maybe," Daniel said, "if the power core still works." "I haven't tested it since last winter." They climbed back up, planning what to take. Food, old maps, tools, extra fuel cells. And one small photograph that Evelyn carried in her jacket, her family from years before the fall. Daniel packed quietly while she looked at the picture one last time, before folding it back into her pocket. Snow began to fall again as night came down. A cold wind slid through the trees, carrying sounds that were not from nature. The hum of engines rose in the distance, small at first, then growing clearer. Lights moved across the far slope, faint but steady. Soldiers were searching with drones that glowed white against the snow. He looked at Evelyn and nodded toward the hatch. It's time. They climbed down into the storage room again. Daniel began pressing switches along the side of the metal craft. The machine gave a slow hum and flickered to life. The sound was soft but sure. He smiled faintly. Still works. Evelyn took the seat next to him. The small cockpit smelled of oil and cold iron. Through the thin glass above them, she could see glints of light moving closer outside. Her heart pounded. Daniel's hands moved fast across the controls. The hum rose as blue light spread along the edges of the wings. The craft trembled. Then the first explosion shook the ground. Snow dropped from the roof above. Someone had found the cabin. Shouting came from outside, muffled but near. Ah! Daniel gritted his teeth. Hold on. He pulled a lever, and the craft lifted slowly, breaking through the hidden roof panels he had built years before, which shattered and snow poured in. Evelyn pressed herself against the seat as the cold air rushed around them. The small craft rose through a cloud of frost, then broke free into the open night. Below them, soldiers spilled into the clearing, shining bright lights at the sky. Rifles glinted in their hands. Another blast shook the ground, sending up smoke and sparks. The old cabin burned, orange against the endless white. Evelyn's chest ached as she watched it shrink below them. It had been their shelter, a small, warm world. Now it was nothing but fire. Daniel guided the craft through the dark, steering between high peaks. The wind roared against the glass, but the machine held firm. We'll head south, he said. There's a range beyond the next valley where no signal can reach. If we make it there, they'll lose us. Evelyn stared down at the world below, scattered with glowing spots of searchlight. All this for one broken queen, she murmured. Daniel looked at her. Not broken, he said softly. Just chased. There's a difference. They flew for hours, the world below, turning from storm to silence. Slowly, the smoke and searchlights disappeared behind them. The stars came out clean and cold. The hum of the craft softened into a steady rhythm. Evelyn watched the sky ahead, where a pale line of dawn was beginning to grow. I never thought I would see the world from the sky again, she said. Daniel smiled faintly. Then tonight was worth something. She looked at him, half smiling, half tired. They'll keep looking, I know, he said. But we have one thing they don't. What's that? Hope, Daniel said simply. The word hung between them. The craft moved forward, gliding like a bird across the silent mountains. Behind them, the old world burned in the distance. Ahead lay the unknown, cold but clean, untouched by power or fear. As dawn rose, the first light touched the snow below, turning it golden. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, feeling warmth on her face. In that small, stolen moment between night and morning, she was no longer a queen without a kingdom, and Daniel no longer a man haunted by his machines. They were just two people trying to find a place where the mistakes of the past could no longer follow. And though danger still chased behind them, what shone before them was something neither war nor fear could destroy. The morning sun rose slowly over the frozen world. The small craft glided low across the valleys, its shadow long and thin on the white snow. Inside it, Daniel kept his eyes on the controls, steady and careful. Evelyn sat beside him, her hands resting quietly in her lap. Her mind felt calm for the first time in many weeks. The storm had passed, and behind them the smoke from the burning cabin had faded into nothing. For hours they flew south, following the river that wound through the mountains like a silver thread.
Ow.
The sun climbed higher, cutting through the cold fog. From above, the land looked peaceful, untouched by soldiers or cities. Evelyn felt a strange hope as she looked at it. She almost could believe it was a new world. Peace never lasted long. Just before noon, Daniel noticed something blinking on the small screen in front of him. It was a signal beacon, short flashes of light showing movement behind them. Said nothing at first, hoping it was only a reflection or a false reading. But the blinking returned, clearer now, and the low hum of engines echoed faintly through the valley. They're following us, he said quietly. Evelyn's calm faded. How? We left them far behind. Daniel shook his head. They must have another craft, faster one. Can't outrun it this way. He looked at the fuel gauge, which was already low. We'll have to land soon before we lose power. He turned the craft toward a thick forest below. The trees were tall and dark, heavy with snow that dampened sound. It would be hard for the soldiers to track them here. The glider dipped between the peaks and slipped under the clouds, landing softly in the shadow of the pines. When the engines went quiet, the silence was deep and heavy. Daniel stepped out first, scanning the wide landscape. The sun was low again, painting long stripes of gold across the snow. Evelyn followed, wrapping her coat tighter. The air was cold, but still. The forest smelled of pine and fresh frost. For a moment they stood there together, breathing the quiet. Then Evelyn said, "What if they find us again? We cannot keep running forever." Daniel looked at her, his breath curling in the cold air. "Then we stop running. There's one last thing I can do," she frowned. "What do you mean?" He walked back to the craft and pulled open a small panel under the cockpit. Inside were several metal cylinders, glowing faintly blue. He touched one carefully. "These are power cells. I made them years ago. 2 of them can keep this craft flying, but all 6 together can release enough force to break the trackers in the sky. It will make a storm strong enough to blind their sensors for days." Evelyn stared at him. "But if you use them all, we will not be able to fly again." Daniel nodded. "I know." The idea hung in the cold air. He would destroy their only chance to escape by air, but it would give them a real chance to disappear for good. Evelyn hesitated, then said softly, "If we do this, what then?" "Then we start over," Daniel said. "There are valleys beyond these mountains where no one lives. We can build homes, plant food, maybe find others who ran away from the cities. You can still lead, but this time, not as a queen, only as a person." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes full of both fear and warmth. "You would stay with me?" "I left everything once," Daniel said. "This time I would rather build something worth staying for." For a long time they said nothing. Only the wind through the trees moved around them. Then Evelyn nodded. "Do it!" Daniel began setting up the power cells carefully in the snow. The faint blue light flickered brighter as he shaped the charge. He connected wires and a trigger from the control panel. The machine began to hum with slow, steady rhythm. Evelyn watched, her breath catching at the sight. He looked up at her and smiled. "When I start it, we'll run into the trees. The light may be bright, but it won't hurt us from this distance." She gave one last look at the metal craft that had carried them across the sky. Then she turned and followed him deep into the forest. They ran until the tree trunks grew thick around them, and then turned to watch from a ridge. The explosion came not as a roar, but as a great white wave of sound and light that rolled through the valley. Snow fell from branches. The distant sky shimmered and then cleared, leaving nothing but silence. The glow from the blast faded slowly until it was gone. Evelyn took a deep breath. "It's done," she said. Daniel nodded. The small craft was gone, melted into the snow and earth. Only peace remained. No trackers, no signals, no more engines in the sky. That night they built a small fire from fallen wood and sat near it. The stars spread wide above them, brighter than they had ever looked before. The air smelled clean and sharp. Evelyn stared up, her eyes soft in the flickering light. "Do you think they'll ever stop fighting?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked into the flames. "Maybe not soon," he said. "Out there somewhere, someone will remember what we tried to do. That might be enough." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Then this is where we begin again." The fire cracked softly, sending sparks into the night. Around them, the forest stood still, and for the first time since the storms and the chase had begun, there was no fear, no sound of machines, no sign of Warrenly, the endless quiet of the new world, waiting for them to live in it.